everyone, it's Desiree, and I am finally here with the Gina K Stamp TV kit that I believe she released a couple months ago. It is called Sunshine and Love, and it gives you 2 stamp sets, 24 sheets of her cardstock, and die sets that go with each of the stamp sets. And then, of course, the awesome storage box. So this is the cardstock that you're going to get, and you get 3 sheets. Now, I'm not going to be in the order here, but you get 3 sheets of the Tranquil Teal, 3 of Sea Glass, 3 of Coral Reef, 3 of Jelly Bean Green, 3 of Wild Dandelion. You get some white layering. You get some white card base weight, and you also get 3 of the black onyx. Here are the stamp sets. Now, these are 6 by 8. And you get 2 of them. So this one here, it is a layered stamp when it comes to the daisies. So you're able to make 2 different sizes of the daisies and then one on its side. And then this one is called the Rose Peonies stamp set. So you have some beautiful flowers, great texture stamp. I love those, grunge, and some vines and beautiful sentiments as always. Yes, I will be pulling out my Zig for those. I haven't played with those in a while. These are the stamp sets that you get. So you get all the leaves and you get the flowers. So you're not going to get the vines or the flourishes that are in the stamp set, but you get them for every other piece there. Yes, I'm folding up the paper right now. So that's everything that you get, and I love them because of the cardstock. I love her cardstock. So I'm going to be using Sea Glass and Key Lime for this, and I pulled out my stamp positioner, and I'm going to use the leafy leaves, what I'll call them. They're not, the typical leaf, long branch, long leaves, very skinny. But I want to do a 2nd generation stamping. So I'm starting out with my Sea Glass, and I want this to be very faint. So I'm kind of conditioning the stamp up. I'm putting some ink on it. I'm stamping onto my scratch paper, and then I'm going down onto my panel. Now, I'm okay that it's not even. Again, I want this layer to be very faint. So when things are like that, again, we have dimensions. So nothing's ever flat unless you print something out on a piece of paper. But even still, when you use colors, it doesn't look like that. So I'm good with the differences that you see there. So now I'm pulling in the Key Lime. And the same thing, I'm okay with the differences. But I'm not doing a 2nd generation. I'm going to do that 1st generation. But again, I just wanted it very soft. I'm pulling in the sentiment, "You brighten my day," because these are awesomely bright colors. And I'm going to use I believe I used the amalgam. I think. Maybe. I believe so. I'm going to use my Altenew tape runner, and I'm going to put that down on my standard A2 size card base, which is always 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and it's always a top folding. I pulled out my Nuvo drops. These are the Jewel, and I'm using Key Lime and I'm using Sea Glass. So yes, they match the names of the inks. But I just wanted to use or put some of these in just to give it some accent and to pull those colors out just a little bit more. I think putting it on a black card base really helped for the sentiment to stand out. There's a lot of leaves going on there. And that's our first card. For our second card, we're going to play with the layering daisies. I don't know about you guys. Let me know in the comments. But and it's operator error. It is not the stamp. These stamps are beautiful. For some reason, I just have a problem with layering stamps. It is absolutely comical. So lots of editing going on here. So we're going to start with the first layer, which these are only 2, which is nice. And I'm using sweet corn for this level. And I'm just going to stamp this all over. So Of course, the first layer's not staying the same way because I'm turning it. So I figured, okay, maybe we'll do better. I'm going to use wild dandelion for the second layer, and look how beautiful that looks. The dimension you get. Yeah, it took me forever because of course I turned it everywhere. So again, it's so an operator error, but I do love the look of them. I think they are absolutely gorgeous. So now I'm going to stamp the center of the daisy, and for this I'm using honey mustard. And I just really like the way that color looks against the two yellows. I always, if it's a new color that I'm using, I like to stamp it on a piece of scratch paper first, just so I can see what the color is going to do. And then I can see it against those other colors that I've used to see if it's going to look sore. Maybe I'd have to change it. Or maybe a second generation stamp. The sentiment that I chose, and I'm using my Versamark ink for it, I made sure I prepped my cardstock with my anti-static tool, is Hello Sunshine. Now I've got a lot of yellows and golden yellows, and I've even got some brown there, but that honey mustard just had a certain color to it, so I decided to use my copper embossing powder on this. I'm going to use some fun foam to adhere this down onto my standard A2 size card base. And I'm going to trim that down, and I will use my double-sided tape that I get from uline.com. And it is strong. Once you put it down, it ain't going anywhere. It is a permanent fixture. No choice. So if it's a full-size panel, which is what this is, it will cover the entire card front. It's okay if you go crooked, because I did. So we just simply trim our card. That's all we do. It's not a big deal. No one will know but you. So if you say something, then somebody else will know. Right? Right. I pulled out my Nuvo drops again. I use them a lot through these cards. And this is dark walnut. And I'm actually going to fill in the center of my daisies, but not completely. I just want little tiny dots to go through. I also pulled out, and again, this one's from the Jewel line, called Limoncello. So I'm putting that all throughout the white area surrounding the daisies. So again, they dry clear, the Jewel Nuvo drops. They just have a hint of color. So this will be a nice little shade in the background. That's our second card. So for our third card, I wanted to play around with the smallest of the daisies because I just think it's really cute that it's on its side. So using the same colors, sweet corn, wild dandelion, except I'm going to pull in a couple greens because the stem is the third part of the layering. So you can see how easy they just layered right up on each other. Yeah, those were easy. I could figure those out. Again, it's operator error. So then I pulled out the stamp, or the stem, and I'm using two colors here. I'm using, grass green and jelly bean green. Because I just use the grass green just on the top portion, just to give it some shading. There is a die for this, so I did stamp that 2 more times off camera, and I'm going to die cut those just as I did, and we're going to get our card panel ready. First, I grabbed my Nuvo blending brushes. I'm a big fan of these brushes, and I grabbed the sea glass, and I just wanted to put a hint of color in the background. I didn't want it solid, and that's what those brushes are perfect for. They are perfect just for a slight hint of color to go in the background, and you're still able to stamp on top of it or whatever it is you would like to do. The sentiment that I chose for this card is wishing you sunshine and love. So, sounds familiar, right? Right. So I'm sitting here stamping this a couple times. Why, I don't know. I finally got it right. I went crooked, or I tilted it, or it was just not a good time for me. Of course, we knew we were going to see the vintage photo, because that always comes in. And I just wanted to put that around the sentiment just so that would stand out on its own as well. I did not put the vintage photo around my flowers. I wanted them to stand on their own. So the background is kind of, to me, clean. Not the vintage photo dirties anything. It just tones it down. So I've got very bright in the back, and then I've got the banner of the sentiment just toned down a little bit. Cutting an extremely small slither of double-sided foam square so that I can put this on the stem of the last daisy that's going to sit up onto the sentiment but come off of it. So I just needed that supported off of the sentiment strip. This banner is going to go across my card base. And this card base is 4 by 5 1/4. So I am just going to trim it just to match up to the other side. So there will be, this will overhang because I didn't want to cut into the flower. Again, a standard A2 size card base. I'm going to use my tape runner and I'm going to set this right down onto my top folding card base. Yes, I will be pulling out some Nouveau drops again. These are actually called Dandelion. And I'm actually going to set those at the base of each of the daisies, just to give it some texture there and some dimension, because a couple of them are put directly onto the card base. I am going to set some up away from the daisies, again, just to continue that yellow through the card. And that was our third card. For our fourth card, here are those Zig Reel Brush. I told you I had them. It just took you a while to see them. I'm just going to stamp my images. So I'm going to stamp the large and the smaller of the peonies. And then I'm going to stamp a bunch of leaves. I am using the Gina K amalgam to stamp these images because this ink pad is good for alcohol and watercolor and colored pencils. So it's very unique. So we're going to test it out because I did not emboss these. We are going to go right to the paper. The paper that I am using is Bristol smooth paper because these, the real brush markers, whether you have these or the Artezas, work best on Bristol smooth paper. So I'm just applying my color. I'm coming in with a mid-tone to help spread that out. And then, and then I'm coming in with my lightest color. Once they're down, I'm coming in with my aqua brush and I'm just starting from the dark and pulling it up. And then I still get my shadows for my leaves. I'm going to do the same principle with each of the peonies. So I'm coming in with my darkest color. I'm now moving that darkest color so I don't get a hard line with a mid-tone color. And then finally I'm going to come in with my lightest shade. Now, when you're going from this light and from that mid-tone to this light, you want to make sure, and you should just get in the habit of it when you're changing colors, just take the tip of the Zig or the Arteza and just clean it off a little bit and then put your cap on, because you don't want that color to sit on that brush. I'm coming in with my aqua brush and I'm just moving those colors around. I'm making sure that when it comes to those areas that I want the lightest highlight, I'm going back over those last so that I will get those highlights throughout my peony. I am not a watercolorist. This is how I work with them. And it works for me. I mean, this is the type of watercoloring that I do. I do go into other areas, but for something like this, that's how I do that. Give it a try. Might work for you. I use the dies to cut each of my images out, And now I'm taking a panel and I'm just stamping my sentiment right in the center, keeping my fingers crossed that I am able to stamp this again because I didn't get a good one. Should have used my stamp positioner. And it says warm wishes. So once that's in the front, I'm going to grab my Lawn Fawn Stitch rectangle die, and that's going to measure 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm going to place my pieces around. So some of them will be glued directly down onto the panel, where some of the items will be propped up using some foam squares. I like to have the different levels and dimensions when I'm using florals like this. The liquid glue that I'm using throughout is my art glitter glue. That is one of my favorites. This second peony is going to be propped up with some foam squares. And you can see just because you have a leaf in a certain shape, you can cut it to make it work on the panel that you're working on. So you don't have to keep the shapes the way they are. We can cut them so that we can maneuver them and make them fit onto the card panel that we have. I'm going to use my tape runner and I'm going to apply this to my standard A2. Yep, broke my tape runner there. Yep, right there. Onto my A2 standard size card base, and of course it is a top folding. I'm just going to trim this little bit off the one side. And for this one, I'm going to grab the dark walnut for the centers of the flowers, and I'm going to grab the sea breeze to add accent around the sentiment. And that is our 4th card. So for our 5th card, it's very simple, but I really wanted to play with the flourishes. And of course, as I was stamping with the awesome grunge speckle stamp, that's what I'll call it, wasn't videoing. Yes, wasn't taping at all. So that's what that looks like when you stamp with it. So I do apologize. Didn't realize I didn't hit the record button. So now I'm going to grab the vine flourishes and then also that single or that other flourish that's in the kit. So I'm putting one, I only use the grunge stamp on the one side of the panel, and I'm going to take the ivy flourishes along that same side, but in the darker area. I'm using my silver embossing powder, so every time I stamp with my Versamark, I'm going into my embossing powder just so I know where I've stamped. I could never see it. This is the flourish that I was talking about, and then I also did the sentiment as well. So this says happy anniversary. So we've got a lot of swirls and loops and scrolls and fancy handwriting. So something so simple. Who knew? Well, I do. A grunge type stamp or a texture stamp can create a beautiful anniversary card. I did pull out my White Blizzard Nouveau drops to give the card just a little bit more accent. So here are the cards that we made in the 5-card 1 kit for the Gina K Sunshine and Love Stamp TV kit. I know it's been a while. I will make sure that the stamp set may be available. If the kit's still available, I will make sure that they are linked down below. Matter of fact, all the products that I used will be linked down below. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Excuse me, as soon as I can. If I forget to list something, which 9 out of 10 I do, just make sure, put that down in the comments as well, and I'll make sure that I update the video description, and I will make sure that you get that link as well. I hope everyone's having a great weekend and enjoying their day, whether you're crafting or whether you're with your family. No matter what it is, always enjoy it, but remember what's most important. Always be creative.